Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. It is Angie Atkinson, and it is Tuesday, which means I am here with the lovely and talented Dana Morningstar. Dana, welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Always my pleasure. And for those of you who are new around here, you should know that we do this every other week every week on Tuesday, and we alternate channels. So make sure you subscribe to this channel as well as to Dana's channel, Thrive After Abuse. And you can also find Thrive After Abuse on Facebook, thriveafterabuse.com, Twitter, all the things, Thrive After Abuse. All right, let's get to it.
Okay.
Okay, so today we thought we would talk about people who get into support groups, people who go into the YouTube comments, people who are intentionally preying on vulnerable people, in this case, survivors of narcissistic abuse. And the reason this came up is because I recently got an email from one of my SPAN members who saw a post in SPAN from somebody who snuck under the wire that said that she knew this private investigator, and this private investigator's name was X, whatever it was, and here's the phone number, here's the email, get in touch with this guy. Thankfully, this person reached out to me before she did any business with the private investigator, who she told me his name, and then she asked me if I knew anything about him, if he was legit, and then she said he only takes iTunes gift cards for payment. So obviously I told her that was not a legitimate person, because of course anyone who takes gift cards only as payment is probably going to scam you and take your money. And there are plenty of private investigators who will take actual money and give you a contract and all the legal stuff in the middle. And then as we were talking about that, Dana brought up some things that happened in her group, and they had also happened in my group. So Dana, what kinds of things would you want to talk about with the groups?
Well, I think just general how to stay safe in a support group kind of stuff is good to know, because a lot of people, myself included, when people first get into support groups, they're so relieved to find other people that understand and get them. And so what they do is, because you're sharing personal stuff about yourself, they tend to drop all healthy boundaries and be very open with everything across the board, thinking that other people are like them. And I've seen this where Angie and I both have rules in our support group to try to kind of head this stuff off at the pass. But what tends to happen is we get members that start direct messaging each other, and they either start asking for a place to stay, they start flirting with the other member or making them uncomfortable. They ask if they can borrow money, if they can get a ride. These kinds of things. And of course, sometimes they're creepy, and then sometimes they can be very sincere and charming, and it can be kind of difficult to sort out who is who. But we really encourage people, giving person money or a place to stay or anything like that, it's not a solution. Even if they are legitimate, it's only a temporary fix, and they would be better off being directed to different resources in their area. And doing so just helps everybody stay safe, and it just empowers them for the long term.
Yeah. And you should know that, of course we have things in place, we have people in place, we have rules, we have all of those things. We're attempting to keep everyone safe. It is our goal, always.
Yes.
But there's always somebody trying to screw over the system or trying to, do something. Even those people that post the GoFundMes and stuff, certainly probably a percentage of those are legitimate need situations, but we can't allow any of them, because there are those that are out there just to take from innocent people.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same, the dating. In fact, in our group, we have rules. There's no private messaging. Of course, we can't enforce that if somebody doesn't tell us, but there's that rule. And then there are the rules of we pulled down the GoFundMe type posts, the money posts, the advertising posts, all of that stuff. But what we were just talking about, there was something else we talked about, Dana. What was it?
Like support groups in person?
Yes, support groups in person. And, it's not that we're against it. And it's not that we're like, probably 99% of the people in that group are decent people, and they're not there for the wrong reasons, or maybe 98%. but most, the few that are there that want to cause harm, they can be incredibly dangerous. And so that's why we thought it was a good idea to kind of bring this up and talk about, things to watch for, red flags. And so, like in both of our groups, we have admin teams, and
Mhm.
you can reach out to those teams and you can
Right.
say, hey, hey, admin, there's this person, they private messaged me. You know, uh, uh, we have, I think, 13 admins, and I know Dana has a pretty good sized team herself,
Mhm.
and they keep, they do their best to keep things safe. There's no way one person could manage, the volume of it. But I think, Dana, we were talking too about, and I didn't mean to just go straight into this, because we were talking also about the situation with the private investigator. You had some good ideas on what kinds of things people could kind of watch for if they were approached by someone, or, obviously gift cards would be a no-no if somebody wants you to
Yes.
pay them in gift cards. What other things were, I can't recall exactly, but you had,
Uh, I would say across the board, that seems to be the new scam is people wanting to be paid in iTunes gift cards, and it's because they're not traceable.
there it is.
So that's these scams that are run from overseas, especially. Just if you even hear iTunes gift cards, just be done.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
and also, um, with meeting people in person, you have to just realize this is the general public. Like anybody can claim to be anything on the internet. They can
that's right.
claim to be so friendly. They can put up pictures and pretend to be, I don't know, 25-year-old, really attractive woman or guy. And then you meet them and they're not. So you really have to have a healthy degree of skepticism. And I would almost say almost to well, I'd say healthy degree of skepticism in this day and age. You just can't take anybody for face value on the internet. So, if you guys, people are talking about going to different group things in different areas, not sharing a hotel room with a stranger,
Yeah.
not taking a cab with a stranger, not doing stuff like this, because you got to realize too, groups like this is chumming the waters for predators. You've got a bunch of people that are afraid. They have trouble trusting anyhow. And they're vulnerable. This is about like the most vulnerable population out there. So it's just really vital that this isn't like you being hypervigilant or you being distrusting or anything like that. This is you taking care of yourself. And so, you just have to err on the side of caution with these kinds of things. So,
Absolutely. And going to the chat, we have some really, and let me just say to you guys right now, really quick, start putting your questions and your thoughts in here, because we're getting ready to jump in.
yes.
But going to the chat, I think we have Meg Daniels, who says, from a professional scam thwarting expert, never, never, ever meet in person. She said, never, ever, ever. And that's, of course, 100%. And this one I thought was interesting too. Life After a Great Narcissist Divorce says, my debit card was hacked, and that was the first thing they bought was an iTunes gift card. So I
Mm,
thought that was very telling. I didn't even know, Dana, this is how ignorant I am. I didn't even realize those were untraceable. I just thought, why would anybody pay with anything, pay for any service with a gift card? And I
yep.
knew that was off. So this is something, that you have to educate yourself about. And I think, when you think about the possibilities, I mean, a lot of times you can get your money back if they, if it's the way your credit card's set up or the way your bank account's set up, but not always, especially if they, I, even if you do get it back, it's still going to cost you time and effort and stress and fear and everything else. So it's just always better to double and triple check, and
Mm-hmm.
right, and
Yeah.
to know who you can trust. And Dana, what do you think are some ways that they should, and this is, let me just tell everybody right now, I'm putting Dana on the spot and myself as well, because it just occurred to me.
Mhm.
but what are some ways that we can, know someone? What are some ways we can know if we can trust someone online, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's just going slow and realizing, just realizing the dangers out there, that anybody can pretend to be anything. And it's sort of like meeting a new friend in person. If when you meet somebody, you just go slow. You're
Yeah.
not quick to, you know, jump in their car or share a hotel room with them or stuff like that. It's the same kind of stuff. So I'm a big fan of, whether it's online dating, whether it's with support group kind of stuff, being aware of, well, first off, being aware of the information that you're putting on the internet. This is another big thing that I see in support groups is people think, oh, it's a private group, so therefore everything I say in here is going to stay confidential. And no, it's the internet. Anybody can copy and paste and then repost.
Right. And we hope that people in our groups will keep things confidential. Of course, it's one of the rules. And if we find out they don't, throw them out. But again, Dana's right. You just have to be careful.
You have to be careful. And so we encourage people, this might mean that you create a fake account with a fake name, with fake pictures, and join that way if privacy is even remotely a concern.
Yeah. And you can hide your groups, and also don't be afraid to reach out to, like, I'm sure you have a similar thing, but if you reach out to like my business manager or my page and you say, hey, this is so-and-so, I'm going to be, signing up for the group under this other name because whatever, we'll make sure you're approved. We just need to know, because we do, my team, I'm sure your team does the same thing. We try to vet people as well as we can. So if we see a blank profile, we're totally not going to let that person in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and another thing is, in our group, we watch really closely for the questions and making sure they're answered in a way that seems legit to us. And I'm sure Dana has a similar thing in place, but again, here we are. Yeah. Oh, look, I Am Negan is here. How fun. Do you have I Am Negan on your channel?
No, but that name is hilarious.
It's a great name.
Yeah.
I like to think that I Am Negan looks like Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I don't really know, but whoever he is, he leaves me some really fun debate comments. So I enjoy him. All right. Hey there, I Am Negan. All right. I have a question. Go ahead.
Real quick, I was going to make one more thing about groups. Another thing is if somebody's private messaging you with telling you that they have some sort of service.
Oh,
I think right away realize that's some shady stuff. And especially if they're in a support group where the rules are no self-promotion, like, we're not here to sell, Mary Kay, or we've got people that are selling supplements for all kinds, you know what I mean? And
yes.
We get a lot of, even therapists and life coaches that slide under the radar and start messaging members. And
we get that too.
It's just, it's right away. You can tell they're not ethical because this is stuff they shouldn't be doing right out of the gate. So
that's right. It's one thing to come in and answer questions or, but in our group, we want only survivors. So we're not looking for, and I'm sure it's the same for Dana's group.
Yeah.
We're only looking for people who need support and who are willing to support their fellow survivors on a peer level. But then you will occasionally get people come in and exactly what Dana said, under the what, and then I've seen it just recently. Somebody was messaging our members they could do some kind of Reiki healing or something. And I thought, it's another way.
Oh my God, we had this guy come in, try to come into our group a few weeks ago, and he supposedly was an abuser who's changed. And he'd written a book, right? And so he's like, I really want to join your group because I've changed and I have this whole program that can help other, men change and this, that, and the other. And I just thought, no, A, B, don't let the door hit you on the way out. And then 3, see, it was like your level of self-awareness is still not there, bud. Like you really think that a bunch of people that have been abused are going to want to, like, having the wolf come into the hen house and like let them know how things go. Like, just get out of here. I was couldn't throw that guy out fast enough.
Yeah, and I won't say any names here, but there are a few YouTubers who are that sort of person too, who are, and I don't talk bad about YouTubers, so that's all I'm going to say. But I always, and I get it, like, okay, I want to hear from the mouth of the narcissist, right? But you can't believe anything a narcissist says all the time. So anyway.
Well, A, you can't believe anything that they have to say. And then B, their experience is limited to them because all narcissists are different. So if they're going to tell you, our kind does this, like that's some of the stupidest stuff I've seriously ever heard. It's just like every diabetic. I'm sorry.
No, I love it. Give it.
Okay. Like every diabetic is different. Every person that has cancer is different. Every person that has a personality disorder is different. Every person that has a mental illness is different. So for them to make these sweeping statements of, yes, we all do this right away, they don't know what they're talking about, because they're not all the same. Some narcissists are charming, some are predatory and malicious, some are attractive, some are ugly, some are good liars, some are bad liars, some are yell and scream, some are super nice.
Some are sex addicts, some of them withhold.
Yeah, like they're all different. It's behavior manifests in different ways for different people. So
that's right. In fact, I just recently wrote my whole story out, which I hadn't done much before, and it occurred to me that the reason I was so blind about my ex-husband was because he was in fact a different sort of narcissist than my original narcissist. Like, they seem like polar opposites, and on some pages they were, but ultimately neither one of them had empathy, and both of them acted in accordance with that. So interesting. Yeah. Anyway, I think that was a great rant. I loved that. All right. That was good.
Yeah. Well, and actually one more point to that real quick, and then we'll move on. Is also the third thing is not only are they only limited to their experience, if they truly are a narcissist, whatever they would have to offer is not going to help you heal.
Right.
So I get it. I know a lot of people are like, well, I know if I totally figure out a narcissist, then I'll know what I'm up against. That seriously is only like 25% of it. It really is. Like, we've got to be able to figure out ourselves and how they were able to get into our lives. And people that are claiming to be narcissists or psychopaths can't help with that. They might think they can, but if they're truly that way, then their brain isn't even wired for that. They are not at that level of self-actualization to be able to do the inner work needed.
That's right.
So
100%. Yeah. That's why yes, I think it helps to understand the narcissist and their psychology. It helps because then you can look at your own psychology and go, oh, that's why that worked. This is what I need to work on.
And then just knowing it's a thing, right? Like, you and I know are huge on this, like that educational component, especially up front when people are like, what just happened to me? How did I get tangled up in this? I didn't realize this was a thing. Like, there's so much validation and healing that can happen from understanding it, but it truly is just step one. Like, there's 4 steps after that.
That's right. And you have to be able to look at it and go, for me, I had to be able to see it like from a scientific perspective, where I could go, oh, that's gaslighting. Oh, okay. And then suddenly it didn't hurt so much. And I was then able to work through and figure out why and what, and so on and so forth. And then I could work on what was wrong with me. Not that there's anything wrong with anybody, but in my case, what I could do to change myself so that I was stronger, so that I was more powerful, I'm not more powerful, but as powerful as I was always, if that makes sense. I think we're all a lot more powerful than we think that we are. And I think in my case, that was totally true, but I didn't see it because I had been taught otherwise. So we have to change our self-perception, and we have to change what we believe is acceptable. No, we have to enforce what we believe is acceptable, because we know in those moments, don't we? When we're in the middle of abuse, we know it's wrong. We know what they're doing isn't right, or at least we think it's not right, or something's not right, right? And then when we finally realize, oh my gosh, I was right, this is wrong, then we can start to figure out, why did I tolerate it? Why did I put up with it? How did we get here? And how do I not go back there? How do I do better for myself the next time? That's what it's all about, right?
Yep.
Anyway, here's an interesting question from Marina. She says, this seems more on topic than I thought. And I don't know this author. I have read the book, but I don't know him personally. Maybe you do. She says, started reading Psychopath Free, recommended by Chatters Here. Looked at the author's picture and it freaked me out. Is Jackson Mackenzie a predator? What do you think? I don't know him personally.
I don't know him. I don't think so. I mean, I guess here's how I would kind of rephrase that. Instead of such black or white terms like safe person, predator, because I don't know if anybody, well, even if we did know him, right? I mean, people knew Bill Cosby and he was fine. So
that's right.
I would look at it with, actually, let me back up even a step further. With all of this information that's on the internet, regardless of the person, the YouTuber, you name it, so much of this stuff you have to kind of hold on to what helps and let the rest go. I think at the end of the day, So
yeah, I agree with you. And I think that's, and as far as I can't speak to Jackson Mackenzie's private life or personality. I can say that I think the book was groundbreaking and
yeah.
pretty great. That's all I know.
If
So
I remember correctly, that his first book, Psychopath Free, was all about, well, not all about, but in part, he was relating his experience.
that's what I thought. It's been a while since yeah.
Yeah. He's incredibly insightful. I mean, his writing and the way that he explains things is just phenomenal. So, I mean,
Right.
Again,
Yeah,
I mean, you have to hold on to what helps, let the rest go.
that's right. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. I do have another question from Mom Amanda Dan. Oh, Dawn. Sorry.
Okay.
She says, I'm mid-divorce with my ex, sociopathic narcissist, worst nightmare of my life. I fear for my children's safety every other weekend when they go with him. And I think she's asking, how can she deal with that? Well, I would start by this: document everything. And if you're fearing for their physical safety, I think that you could, if you have any proof of physical abuse, you could go to your attorney or your local police station. Who did they go to?
Anybody who's a mandated reporter.
Okay.
So a child's doctor, their
there you
nurse, the therapist, the school counselor.
So essentially they'll be reporting to CPS is what.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, she can even make an anonymous report from a
Right.
different phone to CPS and just say, I don't want to leave my name. There are these two children. Here are some of the things that I've seen, and just leave it and make it anonymous.
And obviously specify at their father's house, and not at your house. But yeah, I think that would be something if you're concerned about their physical safety. If you're concerned about their emotional safety, then I think that you can, it depends on how old they are. There are things you can do to prepare them emotionally, and you can always, again, depending on how old they are, give them a cell phone or something where they can text you if there's, something terrible that happens. And again, if it's extreme emotional abuse, I think it's possible that you could, or neglect. I think the same thing could apply that Dana suggested, was talking to a mandated reporter or contacting CPS, and they could help you keep the kids away from him.
Yeah.
I hope that's a little bit helpful. I can imagine how stressful that is.
Yeah. There was a great question here from Susan, who asks, how do you recognize a narcissist? What are the top 5 things to look for?
Oh, interesting. I would say start with, are we talking early? I guess we're talking early red flags here.
Yeah, I guess so.
I would say watch how they talk to people. Sometimes it depends on the type of narcissist, because there are charmers out there, but you might notice that they're rude to waiters, or that they, scream at people on the phone, or yell at their mother or whatever, or you might not notice that at all. That's not even a top sign, is it? I think the biggest number one sign is the lack of empathy, but you don't always see that until, you're well enough in that you can see it. What do you think, Dana? I don't want to.
Yeah. Well, here is where I think a lot of people get tripped up with this kind of stuff, is because they're still kind of thinking in black or white terms of, how can I tell the difference between a narcissist who's dangerous and a normal person who's safe? And I think we need to just back it up a little bit more and see kind of the bigger picture of kind of, how can I tell if this person is somebody I want in my life versus somebody that's not? And really the only way to go about that is just to kind of move slow and see kind of how they, when you set boundaries, when you say no, when you set boundaries with them, you state a preference, these kinds of things. How do they respond to that? Do you guys have things in common? Are they doing things that make you uncomfortable? Or really, that's a big one.
Yes.
Of discomfort around somebody else. How do they treat you? Are they nice? Are they rude? Are they?
Yeah. And one thing I noticed when I was dating someone once who turned out to be pretty toxic, and one of the things I noticed early on in that relationship was the way that he spoke to his mother, who was a perfectly nice lady, but he spoke to her in a way that shocked me, a way that I had never heard
Mm-hmm.
him speak to me, and that was a big red flag for me. Like, and of course I didn't I didn't realize it at the time, but I remember saying to him, "You need to be nicer to your mother," you know, and
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was odd. And then, as time went on, pretty soon I was being spoken to the same way, the same way. Somebody just came into the chat. Wait a minute, what's happening?
I don't know, but while you're figuring that
Okay.
out, I just want to point out what you're saying is so spot on. And that's one of the when we're talking about how do they how do they treat the homeless person on the corner or the waitress or
Yeah.
these other people that you come across in life that can't that kind of have nothing to offer them, basically. Like how do they treat other people? This is very important because you really, at least I don't want anybody in my life who's awful to anybody,
Right.
period. Not just me. Like I don't want anybody that's abusive to other people or to animals or to children or
Yeah.
online, who's an online bully. Like
If somebody has it in them to do that to
yes,
anyone, then yeah,
it's an
absolutely.
issue. Like you will eventually see it because it's in their repertoire or their toolkit of ways to handle things.
Yeah.
And um,
My ex-husband, we got a dog and he beat the dog. And I was like, I couldn't believe it. It pooped on the floor, like dogs do when you get them and they're puppies. And it was, I got rid of the dog. I gave him
mhm,
to someone else because at the time I didn't know, I knew it was wrong and disgusting that he was doing it, but I didn't know what to do. I was very pregnant when it happened,
mhm,
and I was just shocked and
yeah,
horrified, and so I knew somebody that would take the dog, that was going to love the dog and not beat the dog. So I sent the dog on, but that should have been a much bigger red flag for me than it was. And this is where I think, we have to remember as well, a lot of us who grew up with toxic families, we have a high tolerance for crap, a high tolerance for abuse,
mhm,
high threshold, I think is called, where we put up with way more than I should have never put up with that. You know what I mean? And I thought I took action that was appropriate, and I guess I did for the dog's sake, but I should have also taken action for myself much sooner than I did. You know what I'm saying? And I just didn't know.
well, and I think the more emotionally and physically and financially invested we are in a situation, the harder it is
True.
to leave because
Yeah.
we're like, okay, wow, especially if you're pregnant, you're like, I really want this relationship to work out. I want there to be two parents. I want to have this life that I thought I was going to have with this person. And so when that happens, we start glossing over stuff and we're minimizing it. And
Yep.
I've done it too,
Yeah.
and
You
yeah,
become willing to overlook things that like
yeah,
in the core of yourself that you shouldn't, but you can't always even acknowledge it, even in your own head, because it's so, like exactly what Dana said, you really need this to work. You really want, something's a big deal because money or because pregnancy or because whatever it is that, or you're just, this was always your dream and you had your beautiful wedding. And so,
yeah.
I, I always thought, oh, I never want to get divorced. I never want to have this, that, or the other thing going on in my life, whatever, so it's a mess, but it's just important to understand that, yeah, I've been there. Dana's been there in different, in different ways. And it's not just you, I guess. If something feels
Mhm.
wrong, it is wrong. And I like what Dana says about her brother. She talks about, Dana, you talk about with your brother, you say, he is your what is it, your center or
My constant.
your
Yeah.
constant, right? Can you kind of just, I know we've talked about it 100 times, but can you explain
Sure.
that concept?
Sure. Well, so because a lot of people after abuse of any kind, they feel very dysregulated, and it can really be a struggle, especially when we get back out there and we're starting to meet new people. We're kind of getting our sea legs with trying to navigate what's the difference between safe and unsafe or comfortable and uncomfortable. And then a lot of us are fearing we're going to miss out on a really great person. if we start setting boundaries and we see somebody yell, just tears into their animal or does something, we're scared, like, well, but what if, they had a bad childhood and and we start kind of we're waffling back and forth.
Excuses for them.
Yeah. Should we stay? Should we leave? How big of a deal is this? Well, nobody's perfect and And so one of the things, and this is actually a strategy from the book Psychopath Free, is getting a constant. So realizing that there is generally at least one person. In the book, he talks about his cat. His cat is his constant. He feels safe, secure, calm around his cat. For me, that person, that thing, I feel, my cats have questionable motives, so I don't know if I can feel comfortable around them. But like my brother is, I've known him my whole life, and he's a solid guy. And so when I'm around him, I feel safe and secure. I don't question his motives. He's not doing stuff that makes me feel, there's nothing squirrely. I don't feel confused. There's none of that. And I know that he has my best interests in mind and vice versa. And here's two, one of the ways that I know this is because when I leave his presence, I feel energized. I feel empowered. I don't feel confused and drained.
That's a huge deal.
It is a huge deal. So paying attention to how different situations and people leave you feeling is a great way to start kind of getting into that. So if you find yourself waffling, whether or not you're making too big of a deal out of this or not, that can really help. And I think too, just realizing that it's when you make your North Star your safety and your sanity, and safety being like, life's too short for confusing people, for draining people, for toxic, for perpetually confusing, crazy making, that negatively impacts my sanity. So I only want stuff that's just nourishing to me physically and emotionally and mentally.
Yeah. And one of the things I want to kind of pull out from what you said was that the way you feel when you leave that person. And another thing I would like to add to that is when you're with a person in a relationship, whether it's your mother or your brother, your father, your husband, your wife, your sister, whatever, if every time you have to spend time with that person, you get that stomach ache or that little piece of lump in your throat, whatever it is for you. For me, I get my stomach hurts. I get a little sick in my stomach, and I think, oh my gosh, I don't want to deal with this person again, or whatever it is. Red flag, y'all. It's one thing if it's a temporary thing, like, oh my gosh, this person stresses me out right now. That's different. But you know what I'm talking about. There's this feeling of dread if you have a narcissist in your life. Like, this is weird to say, but it's the truth. Never once in my life did I ever feel super comfortable with my mother. Never. Mm-hmm. Not in her house, not in my house, ever, ever, ever. That should have been a red flag, but I just thought that's how it was until I realized, holy crap, there's something wrong there. You know what I mean? So every situation is different, but it's just, I think that's a really important point, Dana, about the way, recognizing the way they feel before and or after, you know what I mean, about that person and around that person. There's somebody here named William Atkinson, and that's my husband's name. But it's not my husband, because this guy's only 21 and fresh. And if I recall, he wrote fresh. And if I recall, he's also a male model from one of my comments. My husband is none of those things. He's more than twice your age. And also he's 46 and not a male model, but that's a good job. Anyway, hey, I have a question from Bonnie, Dana.
Actually, okay, wait, real quick. So you brought up a really great point about how you're feeling about your mom. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to expand on that, because it's so powerful. So even if a person isn't a narcissist, if it's just not for you and they're toxic, or they're not even toxic, let's just say they're not your people. You just have nothing in common with them. And it's just, whenever you spend, a lot of family members fall into that category, right? Like you see them and you're just kind of punching the clock. Like, you're just kind of there because you need to be there. It's not enjoyable. It's not rewarding. There's no common ground. Like, there's just not a lot there. When you do to more of that extreme end, and you're feeling that knot in your stomach, and there's this sense of like impending doom of, oh my God, we've got Christmas, we got to go over there for a week and it's just going to be awful. And then an hour and a half in, you've got a migraine kind of a thing. These are all signs that okay, now it's time for me to reevaluate how much time I'm spending around this person. And so doing that's a form of setting a boundary. So you're like, you know what, I cannot do a week. I can maybe do 3 days. And so maybe then you try that next time, or maybe it's going to be a day and a half, or maybe it's Christmas dinner, or maybe it's just a phone call. Yeah. You'll know when you restore that balance of having peace in your life.
Right. Don't feel obligated to continue to do things that make you physically ill, or that make you feel that way. And it sounds super, I know there are a lot of people who will tell me, you're crazy, that's your family, you can't do that. But look, we've got one life to live, y'all. One. And some of us, we're going to be here another 100 years, and some of us aren't. But either way, it's so much faster. It goes so much faster than you think. I think, well, than some people think.
Yeah.
And why waste your whole life, being miserable? Don't we have a right to be at peace? And that's how I feel.
And and Bonnie had made a comment earlier about her mother. Should people keep pushing her, you got to tolerate this water under the bridge. She's not getting any younger, kind of a thing. And what do we do with aging parents who are abusive? And, I'm also of the standpoint of, well, you have healthy boundaries with them, just like you do anybody else. And because if you have your North Star, you just keep it set. This North Star does not move. This is your North Star, safety and sanity. It doesn't matter if they're old, if they're young, if they're, like any religion, any nationality, if they're at work, if they're your neighbor, if they're your parent, if it's a partner, it doesn't matter. It's your North Star, safety and sanity. And then you evaluate everything else comes from that. All of your boundaries, standards, deal breakers. This is what you need to do. And in order to maintain.
Exactly. And don't, what, I think a lot of times people are like, I don't want to label people. You don't have to label anybody anything.
Yeah.
You don't have to call them a narcissist or toxic or anything. If they make you feel that way, make a decision that, also this question I was going to pull out here was also from Bonnie though. And she said, why is the fallback for narcissists to call you crazy if you don't do their bidding, or you go no contact for your protection? Well, because they don't want anyone to think it's about them. They want everybody to think you're the problem, so that way they don't have any sort of, and to be honest with you, a lot of times narcissists don't even recognize they could be the problem. They twist things in their own head and lie to themselves even. But that's where you see the smear campaign starting. That's where you see the, that's the gaslighting extreme. And spreading lies and flying monkeys and all the things. And that's when you go like this, watch. You say to anyone who you think will hear you, and you would know in your life who those people might be, you say one time, if they confront you with it, or if they act like there's a problem, you say, if you know me, you know I didn't do those things. And if you think I did those things, then maybe I need to reevaluate the situation. And then you step back from that person emotionally until the thing blows over. And then you decide, is that person, worth keeping in my life or not? Because if somebody knows you, they know you. We understand narcissists can be very manipulative, but at the same time, the people who are in your corner will not fall for those blatant lies usually. And so if they're falling for them and you can't convince them by looking them in the eyes and saying, if you know me, you know I didn't do this, maybe you need to, consider stepping back from those people in general. What are your thoughts, Dana?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. It's so much of this is truly just understanding yourself and what, I think a good North Star is just nourishing. Just think about what's nourishing for you. And I know for a lot of people, especially a lot of us who our whole lives, we've been like, well, I'm comfortable back here on the back burner, right? Everybody else, a lot of us, we're more comfortable that way. That's what's can be so scary and set us up for continual abuse is we want other people to get their wants and we want to see other people happy.
Yeah.
and that we've somehow turned down the volume on our own wants and needs. And so it's just restoring this balance.
Right. I need to really quickly, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I hope this is the same one. I think it's a different one, but I have Persiana 451 said she loves our channel. She gave us a
Oh,
$5 super chat, and somebody else I thought had a $4.99 one. I'm gonna see if I can.
oh, you know what? You're right. And I was going to mention it. And then
Yeah. Oh, sorry, we got a little off track, but I want to say thank you to the person who gave us the $4.99 one as well. I don't know exactly who that was, and I apologize. I'm so sorry, but I'll probably find it in the replay, and I'll be able to then comment. But if you want to just hit me up at the bottom of the chat right now, I'll totally acknowledge you as soon as I see it. I'm so sorry. Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have another question that you wanted to pull out?
I am looking.
Okay.
There's so much good conversation going on here.
I know. I have one from Angela Ramsey, who says, now that I am ready to date, I feel guilty about this because of my ex. Is this common? I'm very loyal. I'm almost 3 years separated, but see my ex twice a week as we share custody. Okay. So I think it is normal. I think it's probably more normal than any of us would care to admit. But what you have to do is recognize that you're going to have to, obviously, logically that you're separated. It's got to be harder when you're seeing them twice a week. It's got to be harder when you're sharing kids and mom and dad and etc. But I just want to say, I guess what you have to do, Angela, is decide for yourself that that you're ready to move on. You said you're ready to move on. So the guilt factor, you're going to have to just kind of push past it. Instead of looking at it as a guilt thing, look at it as a I'm growing forward thing. And my guess is that your ex may also have dated other people at some point or something, or might already have a full on new supply. But it's common. As far as feeling guilty about it, I like to look at the possibilities of just self, you don't need to justify it, right? But for me, I would sit down and write up a list of reasons that it's okay for me. For example, we've been separated for 3 years, for example, maybe he cheated on me, or for example, maybe he's already got a new supply, or for example, I worked all this time to heal and now I'm ready to date and have fun and I deserve that. And I would be focusing on things like that, and also things that you can control, not things that you can't control. And also loving yourself instead of worrying about your past, if that makes any sense at all. Dana, I know you have some good advice on this. What are your thoughts?
Yes, shoot. And I got distracted because I was reading the chat.
Yeah, so she is, oh, by the way, this purple on my arm, I don't know if you guys can see it, but
yes, I can see it.
It's my daughter's fault. We had a hair dye situation. Anyway, it's a temporary dye, so hopefully it'll be gone soon. Anyway, the question was, now that I'm ready to date, I feel guilty about this regarding my ex. Is it common? I'm very loyal. I'm almost 3 years separated, but I have to see this person twice a week as we share kids.
Okay. Yes. I guess my question would be, is the guilt, where is the guilt coming from? Is it coming from, like, you feel like you're cheating on him because
that's what it sounds like.
Forward in dating?
Because she says I'm very loyal, and it feels like that's what it feels like. Yeah. But they've been separated 3 years, so I think she has to just change her perception, right?
Yeah. I would agree with that. If your ex was abusive in any way, shape, or form, then they were the one that broke the marriage vows.
Right.
And getting a divorce is just kind of a natural consequence to that. So it's not like you're stepping outside of your marriage. That contract was broken when, deal breaker, relationship busting behavior started up.
That's right. Yep.
But it can feel uncomfortable kind of being around a new person. I mean, I get that. I think Angie gets that. And totally. That also might just be a sign that maybe you're just not ready to date yet. And that's okay too.
Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. That's totally okay. Yeah. And that's, I think we sometimes think we need to push ourselves because, we're not getting any younger. Oh, it's been 3 years. I have to hurry up. And, I know some survivors who say, honestly, I don't think I'll ever be in another relationship. And I'm not mad at them for saying that, because You know what I mean? I'll tell you right now, if I ever, if something ever happens to my husband, who I think is a wonderful man, but if something ever happens to him, I'm never getting married again. I know this for sure. Not because, I'm so in love with him, which I totally am, but because marriage is complicated even when it's good. You know what I mean? So
Yep.
I, I, I have my kids. I'm done with all that, so I'm good. you know,
Yep.
that's a weird thing to say, but there it is. Um, anyway, do you have another question for us?
Let's see here. Susan says, okay, would a narcissist tell his family lies about you to get them to block you and surround him to care for him? Would a narcissist tell his family lies about you to get them to block you and surround him to care for him?
Oh, sure. I've seen that a lot. Yeah. Haven't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. They'll tell his family or, their family. They'll tell your family. They'll tell your friends. Anybody they can get on their side, they'll do. I've seen it 100 times, a lot. And not so much in my own situation because, but I've seen it in this because my family, it's a whole other ball of wax, but I've seen it in client situations where people would, their husband would tell their mom, let's say, oh, she's crazy, she this and she that, or he's crazy, whatever. And then or the wife, whatever. And then the mom would support the narcissist instead of the actual victim. And it's a blatant smear campaign, but yeah.
Yeah. And she goes on to ask, well, would he do that if he was bipolar and not a narcissist? And I just wanted to add, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
Kind of what's going on. If this person is not, if they're not willing to go to a doctor, and if they're not willing to, if they are bipolar and they're not willing to treat it, then it's still a problem.
Right.
But yeah, I think at a minimum, when you're dealing with a person who has, and it can be kind of a challenge to sort out, okay, well, what's really going on here? But at the end of the day, you're not this person, if they have such kind of dramatic, erratic, and emotional behavior that you are just not in the same reality. And that's a problem. Like there's no working with that. And that's the challenge. Like what Angie was saying about a lot of narcissists earlier is a lot of times, they never think that they're the problem. So you have to kind of even just try to imagine, like the only thing I can even think of that even comes close to being this is if you guys have ever been really hungry, and let's say you go to the grocery store and if you're anything like me, when your blood sugar drops, you're just in a foul mood. And when I get that way, I am not myself, and I'm able to restrain myself still, but the thoughts that run through my mind, I just feel if anybody's walking slow, they shouldn't be. And if anybody's doing whatever, then they shouldn't be. It's just all about me. I become very self-absorbed, and man, boy, do I feel entitled to feel that way, but here, the difference is I'm able to see Dana, geez, like you need to go eat something and just chill, and then I'm fine. But it's that kind of mentality of the world should be exactly how I want it to be all of the time, but they don't realize that that's a problem. So for them, when they see somebody that's walking slow, they feel totally justified berating them and being like, oh, you're walking, I've got a problem with this, so therefore it's a valid problem. I feel this way, therefore it's valid. They're not like mature, functioning adults understand that other people have their own wants and needs and opinions and thoughts and feelings, and that just because we might think a certain way, that doesn't mean that they do too. And so we give them that freedom of autonomy, whereas they don't. If you do something like, if you do something that they don't like, then they seek to get you to change that. You've got to fit inside this box. But the problem is that box is ever shifting. Just like when you're hungry, right? Really hungry, and you're really irritable and doing these kinds of things, whatever situation you're going to be in, your thoughts about that are going to change. So someday you might want pizza for dinner. Then if the next day somebody offers you pizza, you don't want pizza anymore. But then you're like, well, I want Chinese. Gosh, you're so stupid for not knowing that I want Chinese. Like, it's just this ever shifting thing, you know? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, that's much better. Sorry. Anyway, no, what you were saying about the blood sugar thing, and when you get kind of cranky, and I noticed I notice I do that sometimes. I don't know if it's a blood sugar thing or what it is, but I find myself feeling like, oh, here's an example. Yesterday, my son wanted me to drop him off at this local park real close to our house, and him and his friend were going to go fishing, and so I paused in the middle of my workday and drove him out there. It's not that far, right? It's like 10 minutes. But then what happened was that on the way home, because then I got stuck in traffic, and there was like this construction thing. And so then just after I pass it, they call and they go, oh, we didn't bring the right kind of fishing poles. Can you come back and get us? So I turned around, I went back and got them, and I had a call at 2:00. Well, it was now 1:30, and I was getting a little testy. And so we got all the way, I got all the way back there to pick them up. We come back, and now the construction, they have all the things in the middle of the road, and it's like this back road, you know what I'm saying? So there's nowhere I can go. I'm stuck. And this, I was so mad. But, in reality, that was a tiny, tiny thing. But I found myself feeling on edge. But I also found myself telling that I was never mad at the kids, but I was mad at the construction workers who obviously didn't do that to hurt me. And, but I found myself apologizing to the kids for complaining, which I was pretty proud of myself for at least doing that. But
Yeah.
But they weren't upset at all, it turns out. But they were apparently complaining with me. By the way, E-Rock, thank you, Susan, Shastina, Jack Lumen, everybody, for telling us. E-Rock is the one that gave us the $4.99. Thank you, E-Rock. We appreciate you. I did not see a question attached to it, and I thought I would have more. I thought I would have I had to restart my browser, so I don't
Oh, okay.
There's yeah. But if you see an E-Rock question, please let me know. Okay.
I have a question here.
Okay.
From Flower Child, who says, as a grandmother, how can I help a child who lives in a narcissistic home? His stepmother is a horrible narcissist.
Ooh, that's rough.
Yeah.
I would say, if you can visit with the child and always be someone that the child can be validated by, that's a good start. If you know that this person if they're not physically abusing the child, it's going to be harder for you to get any sort of agency involved. But if you know that it's extreme neglect or it's extreme, constant fear they're living in, maybe an agency would be involved. I would recommend talking to your child, your son or daughter, who is the parent of that child. I guess it's your son. Is it her son? Or is it?
He didn't say.
Okay. And I would talk to the parent of that child, both of the parents of that child, if you still are in contact with the other one. And I would tell them your concerns as gently and calmly as you can. But mostly I would be careful, because if you say the wrong thing, they may pull the kid out of your life, and then you won't be able to do anything. So I think if you don't know if there's physical abuse, and you can't, if it's difficult to pinpoint anything that would be illegal that they're doing, then you just must validate the child as often as possible. If you're allowed to contact them privately, do so, as and send them nice little, your awesome messages, and not just that, but validation is what, when I think about what I was missing as a child, it was a lot of things, but validation. I wasn't missing stuff. I had enough stuff, but I didn't, the emotional support and the lack of validation was really crushing to me. And I did find validation, at school sometimes with good teachers. I found it through a Girl Scout leader I had, through certain people in my church, so I was lucky that I was involved on that level with different things. But I did not in any way, shape, or form find ongoing validation at home. And so I think that would be one thing you could do. Dana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. I think just, providing a kind of safe and loving, relaxing calm atmosphere for the child and letting them know, like, this is just your time together and that you're on their side. That they can talk to you about things, that you guys, that your time together is spent doing things that kind of foster bonding. Mm-hmm. So, just spending quality time together, letting them know that you care, that they're lovable, like what Angie was saying, just validating them, doing little things to kind of build them up. And then I think also kind of taking the temperature periodically and seeing how the stepmom is reacting to you doing that. So you might have to kind of do less of certain things, maybe more of other things, just so you can stay in their life if she's really wicked,
Yeah, exactly. We would need to know details on how controlling she is, how often the child's allowed to be in your house without them, how often are you allowed to contact them privately? I mean, the child's age, there's a lot of factors to consider, but age appropriate validation is all the way. I mean, I don't care if you're talking about a 19-year-old, they still need it. You know what I mean? So, or a 3-year-old. There's such a big difference in what I know. 19-year-olds are technically adults, but
And I would add to when you're validating that child's reality, because a lot of people, and I've fallen into this too, is when somebody comes to them, oh, I don't think my stepmom loves me, or, she's mean to me. I think a lot of people, the knee-jerk reaction tends to be like, I want them to feel okay. And so then they'll say things like, oh, honey, I'm sure she loves you. Or I'm sure she didn't mean that. Things like that. That's a mild form of gaslighting. And so it's really important that we don't fight their reality and instead just be like, wow, that must feel really hurtful. Or, well, would you like to talk a little bit more? Tell me what's going on. Or how is she mean to you? Or, boy, that's not okay. I'm really sorry that she's mean. That's not very nice and it's not fair. And there's a lot of things that are really lovable about you. Just things like that instead of fighting it. So
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to want to, and one thing I wouldn't do ever is I would never, and Dana, you may have already said this, and I'm sorry, I was slightly distracted, but I would never talk bad about the parents to the child, even if the parents are assholes, pardon my language.
Yes.
Because that is going to, even if the child doesn't mean to, tell on you for saying those things, the child might use that in defense at some point. Well, grandma says, my stepmom's a mean, horrible person. You can't do that because then stepmom's going to throw you right out of there,
Well, and two, it's still their parents, right? So like, it's sort of like one of those things like, oh, I could talk bad about my mom, but if you talk bad about my mom, we're going to have a fight kind of a thing.
Yep.
And so it just makes them more defensive of abusive people. And so, just not picking sides, even if they're wanting you to pick sides. This is the same thing it's the same thing that happens in any dynamic where there's abuse present. If you're in a relationship and your partner's abusive and you go to your best friend and you're like, oh, you know what he did, X cheating and lying and yelling and this, and then your best friend's like, what? Right. And gets all on your side. That SOB, I can't believe he did that. Oh my gosh, girl, then what do? If we're not ready to leave, then we start justifying and we start backpedaling, and then we start shutting down communication because we don't want anybody to rock the boat that we're not wanting to leave.
Right.
So children are very much the same way. And so it is important to stay as neutral as possible, which is incredibly difficult to do if they're, and if it's really bad and it needs to come down to CPS being called, then that's, and I would do it anonymously, but then that's a thing too.
Do what you got to do.
You got to do what you got to do. Yeah.
And Mo Cowboy said something good. This is back on a sort of a dating or marriage vein, but it's a great point, and it actually can resonate for any type of narcissistic relationship, because he says, yeah, Angie, I'm single, and yet I'm now having a relationship with me. And he says, so I really like being single. And I totally get that. I do. And I'm going to be honest, like I said, I'm totally going to be single if anything ever happens to my husband. I'm not saying I won't date anybody, but I'm saying I'm not ever going to be to that place where they're going to live in my house again. You know, it's too much. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that for everybody, because the fact is I did find a healthy relationship, a better relationship. You know what I mean? I did find someone who's got my back and who supports my family in positive ways, you know, and he does have, you know, we're like us against the world. You know what I mean? That's amazing. But I just don't think I'm ever going to take I don't think I'm ever going to do it again. And I know that sounds really weird, but I just, I have too much to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, bizarre thing to say, but there it is. Yeah, Mo Cowboy, I'm with you is what I'm saying. I feel you on that. Because, you know, there's so much, and Negan, I am Negan says, marriage is overrated. Have your fun and part ways. You know, I mean, as long as everybody's on the same page about that, you know. But I'm not anti-marriage. Like I said, I think it can be a beautiful thing. It's just, you know, I'm 44 years old. So like, you know, and my husband, he's, you know, relatively healthy given a few factors. And I don't think he's going anytime soon. So probably I'll be older by the time that happens. And
Well,
moving on.
And, you know, honestly, there's more things to consider. You know, when you're older, there's more to lose.
Yeah.
You know, when you're young, it's sort of like, oh, I just feel I'm just really attracted to this person, and I think about them all the time, and so therefore I should marry them, and we call that love, but it's not.
Exactly
why half of us get in so much trouble, right? But then also down the road, you know, you're combining lives later on in the game. There's things to think about, like what kind of financially, where are they? What kind of debt would you be taking on? What kind of situation do they have if they have adult children or minor children?
Yeah.
Would you be taking this on? Is this something that you want to take on? What is their relationship like with their adult children? Do they have grandchildren? And then figuring out, okay, how are we going to, I think this is important for people to think, like, how are you going to also write wills when you've got blended families and there's multiple children involved? And then if you divorce, or when somebody dies, how is that stuff going to be divided? Because then it's just creating a mess down, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of things to think about going into.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's why, I really think it's a lot of the reason that I'm just not ever going there again. It's just, you just have, you know, this is funny. Because when I found out I was pregnant with my daughter, my last child, I was 32. I looked at the stick and it did the thing and it said, you know, pregnant or whatever. And I thought, that's it, I'm done. I knew right then, didn't know she was a girl, had 2 boys before her. Didn't care, knew I was done. If she was a boy, I still would have been done. And I feel the same way about marriage. Like, I know I'm done. This is the last time. And not that there's any, I love my daughter more than my own self, more than my life. I, you know, love my husband, but you just sometimes, you know, when you're done with some stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sarah's so funny. Anyway, it's a funny thing to say, but it's really the logical reasons that Dana gave were 99% of my issues. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why I wouldn't, because not only that, but here you are, you know, I mean, anyway, moving right along.
Well, and here's a question from Amy. Along. She says, how do you handle the flying monkeys calling you and telling you that you are the best thing that's ever happened to the narcissist and that the narcissist needs you?
Ooh, don't answer the phone. But if you do answer the phone, I would just do this. And this is probably against the advice of most people, but I'm going to throw it out there and then I'm going to let Dana tell you her probably better advice. I would just listen to them and say, okay, thank you for letting me know this. And then I would never speak to them again on the phone until you know that thing is over, that they're over it. You know what I mean? Like, or maybe not at all. It depends on the situation, because somebody like that, they're trying to guilt trip you. You know, if you leave him, he's going to, you know, commit suicide. Or if, you know, you leave her, she's going to, you know, go back on drugs.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever. And That's not your problem. You know, you can't be everyone's savior. No one is everyone. You know, you can only save yourself, honey. So save yourself. That's my advice. What do you think, Dana?
Yeah, I agree. I think, it's a lot easier to just sidestep that kind of stuff if you see it for the dysfunction that it is.
Yeah.
And the dysfunctional part of that is whoever's telling you that this kind of stuff has really skewed boundaries and doesn't understand kind of, I would say, appropriate, healthy boundaries and kind of what one person has control over and what another person has control over, and kind of where you begin and end and where another person begins and ends. And I just, again, like I said, when you see this, when you see the dysfunction that underlies a lot of this kind of stuff, it does make it a lot easier just to smile and nod and realize this person, we are just not on the same page. And if their worldview is telling them, boy, you know what, I really need to go and sink myself to save other people, you're going to be screaming into the wind trying to change their mind. So yeah, I just would really limit contact with them and just realize, yeah, it's not healthy. Like, a healthy relationship is where you've got two whole people that are coming together to form a relationship, not where, somebody needs you. That's it's just too much. It's, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, nothing I would want to sign on for,
Right. Absolutely. I think the only time that's appropriate is if you're talking about a child under the age of 18.
Yeah.
Your child, not someone else's child, your own child, or, a child you're responsible for. That's the only time it's okay for someone in a relationship to always need you. Now, you get into relationships and you find that you need each other for things in healthy relationships too.
Yes.
But you also know, well, maybe not everybody, I know that, yeah, my husband, he brings in a decent paycheck. Yeah, my husband, he helps me, we switch off every other Tuesday for piano lessons. He takes them one week, I take them the next week, But I also know that if I had to, I could do all those things myself. You know what I mean? And I also know that, I could afford my point is, you can need people, but you have to know that if you, in a healthy relationship, sometimes it's 40-60, or sometimes it's 80-20 if somebody's sick, or it's whatever it is, but ultimately the overall average should be 50-50. Does that make sense?
Yep. And Niels is talking about, it's called balance. And yeah, that's what you have in your relationship versus what this woman's talking about with people trying to push her back onto her ex. Those relationships, when it's so one-sided, they're missing that mutuality. Like, yes, there is no give and take. There is no kind of team building with an abusive person, because with an abusive person, it's all about them all of the time. And they take and they take and they take. And it's not a relationship. It's truly is just a manipulationship. And yeah, so regardless of what other people think, it just goes back to keeping your safety and sanity in mind and realizing it's completely reasonable and appropriate to look for relationships and friendships and things in life for that mutuality has to be present. If that's not there, then there's nothing there. Yeah. There's nothing there. It's all one-sided, and it's honestly, it's denial on our end when we're trying to keep these relationships going, when they give us little crumbs of honesty or loyalty, or they tell us things we want to hear, but the actions don't sustain it. They're just fueling our misplaced hope is what's going on.
That's right. Yep. Now I have a question here from Susan Day.
Yeah.
And she said, how do I get over him? It's been over 4 years. I'm married for over 33 years. She's been separated or divorced 4 years. And Susan, I would ask you what your passion is. I know that sounds weird to say that, but what is it that you're passionate about? What do you love to do? What would you do if you could wake up in the morning and never have to worry about money again, or never have to worry about, anything except for just having fun? What would that thing be? And then I would recommend that you start doing that thing. And if you struggle to figure out what that is, I have a free tool. If you go to queenbeing.com/passion, and you can just grab it. It's a passion planner. It kind of walks you through some exercises to kind of figure out what you love to do and maybe do more of that. My point is, I find this is a great time. My phone. All right. I
Mm.
find I find that when you're in that place where you're like, how do I just get over this person and move on with my life? That's a great time to start a project. And so maybe your project is you're going to paint your kitchen, or, I'll go through phases where I want to redecorate a room. So then I'll watch all these videos on YouTube about, how to redecorate your office or whatever room it is, or what other people have done, see if I can get inspiration, tips and ideas, and whatever it is that, give yourself a project and start focusing on something that you love, something that's fun to do, and switch up stuff. Like if you still live in the same house, like maybe move your bedroom into a different room, or if you have like a master suite, then just rearrange it and paint it and buy a new bedspread or something, you know what I mean? And just kind of figure out ways that you can be about yourself instead of about your ex. Be about Susan instead of Susan and whoever he was. You know what I'm saying? Be yourself and love yourself, but let me just make it, just do something that makes you happy. Find a project, do a project that makes you happy, and focus on that for now. And then work through it as you need to from there. But that just sometimes distracting yourself is a huge help toward healing.
Yeah.
Obviously there are other things you can do. Dana, go ahead, and you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think not only is it a kind of a good distraction that you can pour some of that energy into, it's there's a saying, something about we just got to keep living until we feel alive again. And I think there's so much truth in that because it's pouring that energy into things that are nourishing you. Because whatever it might be, whenever there's a void in our life, we quit drinking, we quit smoking, a relationship ends, a pet dies, something significant happens, there's a void in our life. Yes, grief is very normal and understandable and a part of that process, but it really does help to somehow channel this energy into other positive ways and fill that void, because then we're just kind of walking around, with the void otherwise. So yeah, meetup.com is a wonderful website. I just think it's a great way to get out there and expand your social support, to expand different hobbies, and to hopefully meet some like-minded people. And I think once you start doing more of that and you kind of realize, oh my gosh, not only is there life after this, but I can actually have a good life after this, because now you're filling it up. You're filling that void with things that are nourishing you. You want to learn, I don't know, take up Chinese cooking or French lessons or, watercolors or all of the above. You're just bringing in as much of that as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's an interesting discussion, and I'm so sorry that I'm kind of off in left field here, but there's an interesting discussion happening in chat about the cult factor. And I've actually made a video about that, but I know, in fact, Dana, I think you were the first one that ever said that to me, that cult, being with a narcissist is like being in a cult. And I think you're actually in that video I made about it.
Oh, okay.
Now that I mention it. But yeah, it's a great comparison. And it's so true. Bonnie, you should totally watch the video. Bonnie was mentioning it, and several people talked about it. But I just think that's such a valid point. Oh my gosh, what time is it?
Yeah.
Oh, we're still good, right? What
yeah.
time is it? Okay.
It's at 2:30 your time, or 2:25 your time.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure my computer was on point. Okay. All right. Anyway, do you have another question for us? Oh, wait. Can I just say one more thing?
Sure.
Roasted Studios says, you can tell Angie loves her husband. I hope you really can, because I know it sounds weird when I say, but I really do. I really do. It's just one of those situations where, you just know when you're done, this is the last one, you're done. I just know that.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. Okay. Did you have a question for us?
Let's see. Kimberly just added, she says, you just said exactly what I had tried to have in my marriage. It was balance, but there never was. It was all about him. Yes. And so when we start viewing, I think everybody goes through this, right? When you start moving forward and healing, there's all of these different aha moments that you have. You're like, oh my gosh, yes, bingo, that was it. That's what was missing. It's such a game changer. And that the concept of mutuality is a huge one. This one tends to go hand in hand. When people start asking, well, can I be friends with an abusive ex? Or I have a friend that's abusive, or can I be these kinds of things. And then they start expanding their understanding of the quality of relationships that they have in their life. And then they look around like, oh my gosh, my whole life I've had a bunch of one-sided friendships, or the friendships, at least in my case, the ones that had the potential to be good, I ruined. And the reason I ruined them is because I wasn't comfortable with that mutuality.
Yeah.
I realized this not too long ago, and I cried really hard because I realized we've got to get comfortable with that, because I was always so comfortable. Same thing with men. If a guy, wanted to put me first, I was always uncomfortable. It was sort of like, well, then what are you gonna, you're keeping score, or like you're gonna ask for something down the road, or this is too good to be true, or what? It just didn't feel authentic. And so there's a lot of what we were talking about earlier. Healing from this is changing a lot of our kind of world views, our mind maps for how we interact with other people and see ourselves. But yeah, open, honest, sincere, solutions-oriented communication. It's the foundation of a mature relationship, as is emotional maturity and empathy. Yeah. And if those things are not there, then no mature relationship is possible.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely. Now, here's an interesting point, and I think I hope this will help what I'm about to say. Crystal Jean says, I wish I could erase the narcissist from my brain, not the lesson and knowledge, just everything about him. I honestly don't care what he's doing, but I can't get him out of my head sometimes. I feel you. So what I would say is this, number one, time will help. Number two, if you're to this point where you've got the lessons learned, you understand what you went through, now is the time to start using pattern interrupts on yourself, so you can intentionally start to change your mind. So if Crystal, okay, look, I've healed from this. I understand what happened. I'm ready to start to move forward and have my life. Good for you. Now, if you want to get the person out of your head, next time you feel him in your head, be aware of it. Notice it. I call it like intentional thought management, right? So like you intentionally notice, okay, I'm thinking about him, this sucks. Now, instead of continuing to think about him and why that sucks, you then, stand up and move into a different room. Or one of the things I do all the time, I do this little affirmation thing. It's like 2 sentences long, or a sentence and a half or something. It's, I now cancel that thought and replace it with this affirmation of my true divine desire. And I'd have to think of all the words, and then I have to say something that I really do want instead of something that I don't want. And what I find happens is that it totally changes my mind, because I now have had to stop my thought process long enough to think, I now cancel that thought and replace it with this affirmation of my true divine desire. And then, and then I think of something I want. So by this point, the flow has been broken and the pattern has been broken. Now I start to change. You can do this by moving into a different room. You can do this by going and brushing your teeth, taking a shower, walking around the block, getting in your car and driving down the street. Anything to interrupt the pattern of thought. And a lot of times to mindfully bring yourself back into the moment, into your current place in the world, into your body. Dana, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a big topic. If you've already got the messages, I think, from the abuse, and I guess it depends on like what feelings are surfacing. If we're talking like triggers, or if your mind's just kind of wandering, or you just find yourself kind of thinking about them, or, and sadness takes over. I mean, I think there's a number of things you could do. Like, I love the idea. I'm a big fan of pattern interrupt kind of stuff as well. Sometimes you might just need to allow yourself to feel what you feel and kind of just let that emotion pass through, just like a cloud forming and then passing over in the sky. But I think when a person's at that place where they're like, okay, you know what, I'm ready to do pattern interrupt stuff, I'm able to be more fluid with these emotions. Whereas when a person's first out, these emotions, they just grab you, and they can last for days or months or even years. And it's so hard to find your way out. But when you get to that place where it's like, okay, yeah, you're able to have some emotional distance, I guess is what that's about. And kind of, work with how you're experiencing this. So you realize, okay, you know what? Yeah, this is really sad. This is a sad thing. And I'm okay with feeling sad about this. Realizing, okay, I'm not going to stay sad for days on end. I'm going to open this door, allow this emotion to pass for the next 20 minutes or what have you. But then I'm going to keep moving forward. For me, there were some things I just had to shut the door on. And where I was like, you know what, there's so much pain that's there. Like there was just no value in opening up every single door and sitting with those emotions. So I kind of, I guess, did more of like a mass grieving for like a lot of stuff. And I don't know. I think it was such an individual process. But one of the things that I do now is if anything, I guess, uncomfortable okay. I guess I try to use every single thing that happens to me in my life towards my highest and greatest good. And when I'm able to do that, no matter what the situation is, a lot of those feelings of anger and bitterness and resentment just dissolve, because then I no longer feel like a victim.
Yeah.
I'm able to just be like, yes, what happened to me? I was victimized. This was not right. And it wasn't fair. I'm able to hold on to that lesson. Mm-hmm. But those feelings of the injustice of it tend to diminish with time. Like, for example, I had a coworker who made my life absolutely awful. Anyways. And so whenever I find myself thinking about her, and there's still a lot of anger there, and this was several years ago, but there was still a lot of anger there, I remind myself, I'm like, Dana, there was so much good that came out of this, because it was kind of the push that you needed in order to leave your job. And her behavior really clarified to you that this is not the kind of friend you want in your life. And I just kind of focus on everything that I was able to squeeze out of that I could use for my highest and greatest good.
Sometimes that's all you can do.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's, you know what? And I'm going to tell you something. I found myself, and it was a long time ago. I mean, like, I don't know, like a few months ago in a live stream, answering a question and telling my story about how my mother called CPS on me when I was and a revenge call, which was unfounded and proven unfounded. But, and I remember saying, and now I'm grateful for that moment, because of the fact that I learned the lesson and I was able to go no contact as a result of it, I became angry enough that I could pull away. And that's what I needed to do in my case. Here's the thing. I really am grateful for that now, today, because if I hadn't had that, that justified anger that caused me to suddenly, that thing inside me broke, that feeling of obligation, physically, I felt it almost physically break. If I hadn't experienced that, I would have never been able to move forward and have the life that I have today. You know what I'm saying? Because I would have still been stuck in this invalidated adult child kind of state. Even though I was an adult, I was still allowing myself to be controlled from across town. You know what I mean? So she wasn't paying my bills and wasn't doing it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like that. It was just very toxic and controlling. So I think that that's the point that Dana's trying to make, is that sometimes even with the bad stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, Dana, but sometimes even with the bad stuff, if you can find something that, does serve you highest, the lesson in it or whatever it is, you can then move forward. I call it the silver lining. The silver lining of this cloud is now I'm becoming more evolved and enlightened than I've ever been, because I've, learned to grow forward from there. Yeah.
And this isn't, for anybody out there, this is not like toxic positivity where we're somehow like ignoring or avoiding the bad. We're acknowledging that it's there, but there does come a time and place where you've gotten the message. that the anger or the pain has, where you're like, okay, yes, I realize this. I'm angry. I'm angry that this person deceived me. I'm angry that this relationship didn't turn out the way that I thought, that I was led to believe that it would. These are all very valid feelings, but then it's sort of like, okay, then now what? So we can continue moving through that anger, but there's a term for this. It's called sublimation. And it's when you take kind of all of this energy and you channel it into something good. And it is a way to move through things. And for me, that's, it's a powerful way to make these shifts into thriving. And sometimes, like I said, you have to, as these emotions come up, to continue to redirect your thinking of, like with a coworker. Yeah. You know what, Dana? Yeah, that was not fair. That was not right. You have every right to be upset and angry. Just, that was ridiculous. But here's what we're going to do with that. We're not just going to sit here and stew on it. We're going to move forward, and this is how we're doing it. So. Right.
And to be fair, I want to clarify something. It wasn't like the next day or week or year that I became grateful for that experience. I was angry for a long time, but just like Dana said, I had to work through it. And I did find, if this is of comfort to anyone, I did find that because I instinctively went no contact with her in that moment, I was done. And I found that almost instantly I felt lighter. My chest felt less heavy. And even though I went through the mourning period and all the things that we go through, the constant, like, I had to reimagine my whole life because all the things I thought were true, I realized were not always true. Some of them were not, because that was my parent. I had to reconfigure my brain a little bit. So it took a while for me to get over it, but to be able to say without even realizing I was going to say it, now I'm grateful for that experience, to me represented a big, huge chunk of healing. And so I thank you for pointing out, Dana, this is not toxic positivity. It's not made up. It took years to get there, but it was certainly worth the trouble.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Well, do you want to maybe each do a question and then we'll wrap it up?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not giving me that. Usually it tells me, okay, you've been streaming for 47 minutes or whatever, but now it's not telling me that. So I'm confused about the time. All right. Let's see here. That is off topic. Okay.
Well, here's one from Negan.
Okay.
It says, how does anyone walk right past all of those red flags when everything is all about the other person, especially when they just double down instead?
I saw that question. And I would say to Negan the same thing I maybe said before. I would say you have to recognize that in the moment, red flags aren't always visible. That's part of why Dana and I do what we do, because we're trying to help people see them earlier. But if you come out of a toxic home and you don't know any better, you might not see them, or you might choose, like we talked about earlier, to gloss over them because you really like so many other things. Dana, thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing is red flags are not seen, they're felt more often than not. So that's a big one. And in society, most people are taught to kind of give other people the benefit of the doubt. There's all kinds of well-intended bad advice that we're all showered with. Yeah. Oh, you need to forgive and forget. Oh, this person's your parent. Oh, all parents love their children. Commitment takes work. Relationships take work. You're not perfect either. All of this kind of stuff. The unintentional result of this is it can push somebody into doubting themselves and staying in a bad situation. And not only that, but most people, this stuff's not taught. And so most people, when we talk about boundaries and stuff, a lot of people, they feel selfish with the thought of, oh my gosh, I should, it's just not taught how to walk that middle ground. So people really struggle with knowing how to navigate these difficult situations. And again, you have people, oh, well, this is your mother. She's elderly. You should let her move in with you. She's dying of cancer.
Society does it. And our social groups, churches and et cetera. I mean, they tell you don't get divorced. They tell you don't, you married for sickness and health and all this stuff, but it can't all be sickness. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And I'll just add to this too. So I just want to really drive home this point. It's not like, here's the thing. Nobody thinks that they would ever get in an abusive relationship.
That's right.
Everybody thinks, oh, that's stuff that happens to other people, that we'd all see it coming. And I guarantee you, every person who thinks that is wrong. And not only are they wrong, they're incredibly vulnerable to get into situations like that because it's not even on their radar.
That's exactly who I was. I thought I was.
Oh, yeah. So, it's just easy. We all think that. We all think it's easy to play kind of Monday morning quarterback and to think, oh, we would do things differently when we have the benefit of hindsight.
Yep.
So, and emotional distance. These kinds of situations are so difficult to navigate once you're in them. Sort of like nobody thinks they'd ever be in a cult. Nobody thinks they'd ever get caught up with an online scammer. Right. Nobody thinks they'd ever get to be 600 pounds or to be an alcoholic or, like sometimes because we're not taught about how these things happen, it's easy for people to fall into them.
Absolutely. You're on point. And like I said, I was that. Even though I grew up the way that I grew up, I thought that somehow would protect me from getting into an abusive relationship. And then when the abuse was different, I thought, oh, this is different. This is weird. It's uncomfortable. I don't like it, but maybe I need to put up with it. This is my husband. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a whole thing. So I get it. Listen, here's the other question. Meg Daniels asks, seems like a bunch of people are wanting to know about how to help children with narcissistic parents. You go over some suggestions to help them. Yes, I've done videos on this. I know that we've talked about it before, but I'll give you a couple of really quick suggestions. And then Dana, if you want to throw any in before we wrap up. Basically, if you are talking about your co-parent, it comes to partially educating the child up to the point that they can be educated at their age and with their ability to understand the situation. Let them come to you with concerns and things like that, but also teaching them, giving them plenty of validation and teaching them, of course, what's safe and what isn't safe and things like that. But it really truly depends on the whole situation. I will tell you again, validation is the number one need of a child who's being emotionally abused or neglected. And so validating that child could change their life in very positive ways. If you're talking about, that's so for a grandchild or a niece or a nephew or whatever. If we're talking about a co-parent, it's a tough thing. But again, you have to focus on validating your child and educating your child up to the point that they can, and then talk to them. Like, so when you have a 4-year-old that comes home, you don't want to sit the 4-year-old down and grill them. What happened at your mom's house this weekend? Tell me all the things. Never want to do that. But you might sit down with them and give them a coloring book and, or whatever, something to do with their hands, and then just chat them up. So did you have a good weekend? How was it? Oh, that's cool. What did you guys do? That kind of thing. A natural, easy conversation. And sadly, that's the best way that you can a lot of times get the honest truth out of somebody, a little kid like that. And you can do a similar thing for an older kid, but maybe with a different type of activity. You're making dinner together, you're sewing something. I don't really sew, but I think people sew together. Or you're like painting their bedroom or anything you can do, or together, playing a video game, whatever you guys do. And then just gently chat them up, oh, how was your weekend? All the things, you know what I mean? I think and then if you find out something is a problem and that's reportable, then report it, or deal with it then. But most of the time, I would say that probably 80% of the time, the worst thing that happens is narcissists can be decent weekend parents. That's all I'm going to say. Not always. They can be decent weekend parents sometimes. So if they are the weekend parents, Dana, what are your thoughts on this? I'm going all over the place here.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The only thing that we really have control over, if we've got a loved one or a child that we care deeply about who's in a toxic situation of any kind, is just to provide, to acknowledge that and to step up when we can and just be like, hey, you know what? My house is a safe house and you're welcome to come stay here. You're welcome to talk to me about things. And you're also welcome to not talk about certain things. If it's uncomfortable or what have you, like I enjoy you. And even though I might be your father's mother or whatever, the relationship you are to the abuser, that this is your relationship is outside of that,
Right.
and that you're always here for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. I have no idea how far we went over, Dana, because I can't see the time, but I really appreciate you being here.
Yes.
I know we're over. How far are we over?
I don't know. We're pretty over. It's 3:45 my time. That's okay.
Holy smollies. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
But we had a great discussion today.
We did. I enjoyed it. Tons of great questions. And yeah, Negan too. You're asking questions that everybody asks.
That's right.
So even if it's causing a few waves, I think it's good, because this stuff needs to be addressed, because people hear this kind of stuff and we all hear it in our day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Absolutely.
Keep the questions coming, guys.
Right on.
And we'll see you next week.
Yep. See you next week. And don't forget, next week we'll be over on Dana's channel on Tuesday. So make sure you subscribe to her at Thrive After Abuse. See you soon.
Okay. Bye.
Thanks, Dana. Bye.